Hey everyone, Cullen Tescu with Strive Medicare, and today we have another great interview for you. We've got Scott Bradford here. He is a local financial advisor guy. I'm going to introduce him in a minute, but we want to bring interviews like this to you as much as we can because there's things that we here at Strive Medicare are experts on, and there's things we're not, especially related to Medicare, financial, we are experts on Medicare things, but someone like Scott is definitely an expert on the financial things that are adjacent to Medicare, maybe leading up to Medicare, maybe all kinds of things that we'll definitely get into. So welcome, Scott. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are?
Yes, my name is Scott Bradford. I'm affiliated through Mutual of Omaha, and I've been there for just almost 5 years now. And the areas that I focus in are preparing individuals for what retirement is going to look like, not only to their investments, to their bank account, some of those health questions, and how do you make all those things work together with our friends over here who do the Medicare side of things. So there's a lot of uncertainty out there when people come to how do I manage my assets? What do I do now? I've always had this 401k that I've been putting money away. Now real life comes and I have to decide, what do I do with this big pile of money now? And for a lot of people, that's overwhelming. So what I and my team do is really create just a well thought out plan that guides you through all those big decisions that you're going to make, whether it's going to be in the next year, what you want to accomplish in the next 5 years, 15 years, what financial life might look like, and how you can feel good about being in the best position you can be for the next 25 to 30 years.
Awesome. Yeah, great. That's going to be a ton of good information. So let's get into it. All right, Scott. So the first thing I want to ask you is, what is one of the biggest things that people miss about being financially prepared for Medicare? Or what's one of the big headaches or big problems that you can run into with people?
Well, a lot of people haven't thought about taxes in retirement and what that's going to do to them.
Yeah.
So that's a big piece. And when we're putting money away in our traditional 401k, it's nice because, hey, we get a tax write-off. We didn't get taxed on that $6,000 or $15,000 or whatever it happened to be that year that you put in. Now it comes time to take that money out, and guess what? You pay taxes on that, right? And here's one thing that everybody thinks is, oh, well, I'll be older, I'll be in a lower tax bracket, all these different things. Not necessarily, because we don't know where taxes are going to be someday. So that's one of the biggest things that people say, okay, well, now I have this big pile of money that I've got to get out. And once it crosses this line, once it goes from this bucket to my bank account, the tax man comes, right? So there's a big liability there that people haven't thought about. And it's great if you think taxes are going to go down in the future, right? But who really in America thinks taxes are going down?
Yeah, sure.
So that's a big piece.
So what are some ways to protect yourself from those?
Well, we like to start off people thinking about what we call tax advantaged accounts. The biggest, most usable one that people do is called your Roth IRA. So what that is, right? You're putting in money that you've already it's not pre-tax money, you're not writing it off, but what that does is works just like your other individual retirement account. But when you take money out, it's not taxed anymore, you already paid your taxes. And it's not going to be counted as income either for the year. So if I take money out of my traditional IRA, right, or my 401k I've never paid taxes on, the government also counts that as income. So tell me, in the Medicare world, if our income goes up, what happens to those Medicare premiums?
Yeah, they go up as well.
Right.
You get the Part B IRMA, the prescription drug IRMA, your premiums are increased with your income.
Exactly. So that's when people look at that, they say, now I have this big pile of money, and I don't want to pay a lot of taxes when I'm older.
Sure.
So that's probably one of the biggest things that can really have a huge impact multiplied over years and years of retirement that most people aren't really thinking about or aware of.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. So Scott, I know about a Roth IRA. I'm familiar with the idea. For someone like me or you or a kid fresh out of college, there's a great opportunity for someone to save there. But if someone's on Medicare, is that still something that they could use, or what's the best timeline for something like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. There absolutely is. It's not too late. So that's the good news, right? So one thing that you should ask your advisor or tax professional about is, how does what we call a Roth conversion impact me? So let's say I've saved up all this money in a big pile of our traditional IRA, right? And so what we want to do is you can move some of that money over into your lower tax brackets to what we call a Roth IRA, and that's called a Roth conversion. It's a little bit complex to explain all the inner workings, but that is one way that you can go ahead and move some of that money out, take your taxes today, and be well positioned for the future.
Okay.
So that's something that we work a lot with our clients on, is saying how do we take advantage of those certain situations if we're able to do that with how your assets are positioned.
Yeah, good. So, Scott, we've talked about the consequences of increased income during the Medicare years with an increased Part B premium and some other kind of increases that come with a higher income amounts. Right. So what sort of things can you do before Medicare, leading up to Medicare, and even in the Medicare years to protect yourself from paying a higher Part B premium and some of the other adjustments?
Right. So going back on those lines with doing a Roth conversion, right? It's more advantageous to get some of those things done early in your early years, so you get this money out of the way. So one way to do that is, again, talk to your tax advisor and say, okay, well, can I afford, and this might be before you even apply for Medicare, maybe you're age 63, something like that. Say, hey, I can move this money over from this pile to this pile. Maybe it's going to be $25,000, right? And maybe you're going to pay 20% tax on that. But that's going to return dividends in the future, where you're not going to have that liability on your shoulders anymore. And again, it's not going to add up into your income in ways that are going to impact your Medicare premiums, those kind of things. So that's a great way to get around doing that.
Okay. All right, Scott, let's talk about long-term care. I know this is something you know a lot about, you work with, you're familiar with. Obviously, it comes into what we do here, in that long-term care is part of healthcare. Typically, people don't want to think about long-term care. They don't want to think about themselves in a situation where they're in a nursing home or some facility for months or years. I mean, that's not somewhere anyone wants to be. But the reality is, we all get older and our health declines, and we have conditions that put us in those situations. And so we know a lot about Medicare, especially like Part A and inpatient coverage, and some of the benefits that you can get directly from Medicare or Medicare supplements. But typically that's only going to be up to 100 days or 3 months.
Right.
Where I tell people that feels like a time to, you have time to get things figured out and have coverage for Medicare from Medicare Part A. But that's not a solution for long-term care.
Yeah, exactly. So you just reminded me of one of the biggest misconceptions out there about long-term care in nursing homes is Medicare is going to pay for that, right? Yeah. And we know it doesn't quite work that way.
No.
What Medicare pays for your hospital benefits for a certain amount of time, but once it's time to go home, once it's time to live your life outside of the medical care, well, now what are you going to do?
Yeah.
And one thing we say is, and this, you're right, this is not the fun part. We love to talk about how our stock portfolios are going to grow over 20% and buy Tesla and all these cool fun things that you can maybe do with Bitcoin someday, all that fun stuff, right? This is like the buying the power surge protector for your fancy TV. It's boring and in the back, right? No one wants to talk about that.
Yeah.
But everybody has a plan for long-term care. You just might not like the plan that you currently have right now. So you go into a nursing home facility, or who's going to take care of you? Or if you can't do those things on your own someday, it's going to happen. Are you going to, how do your in-laws feel about you moving in with them, right?
Sure.
Have you told them that's your plan yet? They might not be so happy about that one.
I don't think Medicare covers that.
No, I don't think so either. So when we talk about this, it's saying, what are you really doing by planning for long-term care? And through the different policies that we offer, and you're saying, hey, I'm having a plan. I know the money's going to be there to do what I need it to do when I want it to do. Right. So that's the essence of that. And one of the things we run into a lot is people say, well, I'm going to have $800,000 in my investment account. We'll just pay it out of there. I've seen that time and time again. Nobody pays out of their assets. You don't want to. Take the market right now. The market's down, right? Say you just lost 40% in the last, the S&P 500 is down 24% this year. So if you're invested in your stock accounts, they're probably down about that much, right? So now is the time when you want to take out an extra $30,000 this year to pay for your long-term care? No, nobody wants to do that. They're already feeling broke. So it's nice just to have this money that you've set aside, to have the money, again, to choose where you want to go, and give yourself that flexibility.
Yes, you mentioned assets, and I know that most states have an asset limit for the Medicaid spend down.
Right.
Can you tell us what it is here in Wisconsin, or what people can expect?
Yes, correct. So let's say that the Medicaid spend down applies, right, when you are out of money. Essentially Medicare, we know what Medicare pays for. Mm-hmm. Medicaid will pay for your nursing home benefits, but it's really considered the welfare option. Most people, so what you have to do is you have to qualify to get that. And so it's meant for people who really have no more money left, that are spent it all, maybe already out of their assets on their long-term care facility, nursing home, or whatever it was. And now they need to still be taken care of. So it's a government program that's set up for that. So what that means is the government comes in and says, well, we're not going to give you long-term care facilities if you have $200,000 in the bank. That wouldn't be fair, right? So they're saying you have to basically spend everything that you have. And the Medicaid spend down limit is $2,000 of assets.
Okay.
So you have to spend down everything. That means selling the house, all these other things, any kind of assets that you have, antiques, whatever it is in your estate, and be whittled down to $2,000 before you qualify for that.
Okay.
There are some quality of life benefits that your spouse, say you're married and the husband or wife goes into the nursing home, you can qualify for that. The husband, your spouse will still get, some living. They won't have to spend down so much. Sure. So they have a little bit that they can keep. But hey, it's not much. It's definitely not the dream retirement that you plan on taking.
That's not the dream retirement. So what is a better option? Can you combine things, or is it just inevitable that the Medicaid is what people have to just get to, or?
Right. Well, for that brings up a really good benefit of having a traditional long-term care policy and purchasing one, is what we call the partnership. So the government about 10, 15 years ago or so, they came up with a plan that, hey, let's incentivize people to buy long-term care plans. So one thing that they did was go ahead, and if you buy a long-term care plan, you're going to protect some of your assets from the Medicaid spend down. So if I have a long-term care policy that over its lifetime would pay out $300,000 of benefits, right? So now I get to keep $300,000 of assets before, if I have to go into Medicaid, the government says, well, you bought this policy, you get to keep $300,000 worth of your assets. Okay. So if people have things like, hey, family farm, all these other different things, those really cool cars that you collected, or just, your IRA assets and things that you would rather have go to next to your family, an inheritance, rather than go to the nursing home, that's a great way to protect that.
Okay. Yeah, good to know. In terms of Medicaid, and I mean, I've heard a whole bunch of horror stories, and then no, that's not the way to go. Yeah. But is there a look back period or a time before you can sell the farm and all your car collectibles and those sort of things?
That becomes super important too, because here's how that seems like a pretty good deal. Like, oh yeah, dad's got to go in the nursing home, doesn't have any money.
Sell all this stuff.
Sell all this stuff. Or hey, give the kids the house before you know. So the government again stepped in and said, nope, we're not going to do that. So they look back at any assets that a person has given away within the last 5 years, 60 months.
Okay.
So if you gave, the house, put it in your kid's name to protect it from going to that someday, but it hasn't been out of your name within 5 years, they can go ahead and reclaim that asset, and you make your kids pay the money back or give the house back. Yeah. So that becomes just a real big financial mess too.
Yeah.
So, there's also, if you're really getting into your estate planning and things, and there's trusts that you can set up that are going to protect some of those. But again, it's always subject to that 5-year look back period.
Good to know. Yeah. So when should someone start thinking about purchasing long-term care? I mean, is that something that I want to pay for the next 50 years, or is it a better time to buy it? And then how can I pay for it?
Yeah, that's a lot of great questions there. So probably age is the biggest one, and it gets a little bit lower every year. So generally, I'm not saying you have to buy a policy, but start thinking about this stuff. Maybe when you're even 55 to 60 is a great time. And the reason we say that is long-term care and insurance isn't really something you just go out and buy. You have to qualify for it.
Mm-hmm.
And how you do that, you qualify with your health. And so the industry, long-term care space has changed quite a bit since these policies first came out in the mid 80s. And a lot of companies are not in the business anymore because it became a lot more expensive. So the companies that are still offering these policies, yeah, they're much better, they're managed much better, all these different things, but they're a lot more stringent on who gets in. And I've seen some, people that which you would think were pretty, hey, this is a pretty average treatment for a 58-year-old. Not a big deal, right? I've seen people get disqualified for some of those things that you wouldn't think are a big deal. So it's always great just to say, hey, is this something that we should start looking at? How do we pay for it? And now that I'm young and healthy is always the best time.
Yeah, so it's good to know when to purchase it. But one thing that I've ran into personally with people is they're frankly getting up there in age, fairly
Right.
old, and they have this very expensive long-term care policy that they've been
Sure.
paying for like since the 70s or something.
Yeah, right.
And it's really expensive. Do you have to purchase essentially lifelong coverage, or are there coverage periods you can choose from?
Yeah.
What does that look like?
Well, so a traditional long-term care policy, and we can get into a couple other policies that exist out there, but we'll keep it simple right
Sure.
now. So that's something that you're just going to pay premiums in, just like you do your car insurance or home insurance. You pay premiums in for however long you want the policy to be in place.
Okay.
So as far as policy length, right? So think of this as once I go on a claim, right? How long would I want this policy to pay me money? And there's a lot of different options there. When I'm planning with someone for long-term care, depending on how it fits the budget, but I always start off right in the middle. I say 3 years of a policy.
Okay.
And why that? Because that's the average time that people are going to spend in a nursing home.
Yeah.
Some will go for 5 or 10 years, but some people might only 2 years. So it's a good starting point for us to start to look at. Then we say, okay, well, how much is that going to cost for this amount of benefit for that many years?
And I'm assuming the amount of time that you, like you said, you enter that claim, basically
Right.
how long you spend in the nursing home covered, I'm assuming that affects the cost of the
it
policy.
absolutely does, yes.
Okay.
So it really depends on how much financial protection do you want against this potential thing that is a threat to your assets and everything else that you hope to do with your retirement money someday. So really what we talk about is I'm not really paying for the long term for a nursing home insurance. We call it anti-nursing home insurance just to keep me out of that. And we're also, think of it as building a shield over all your assets. You're protecting them from this potential threat, which if we look at this, when we write term life insurance policies on 20-year-old kids or 30-year-old people, the amount of claims that are claimed on that is 2%.
Wow.
The amount of people that make claims on these policies are 75%.
Yeah.
So quite a bit of huge difference that we know you're probably going to spend some of this money. Somebody is going to do that. So the cost is prohibitive, and we say, well, maybe not just insure. Maybe you don't have to fully insure yourself against this. Maybe, talk to your financial planner or an expert in this and say, well, how would I look at the end of this if I maybe say insured myself for half of that? That has a great positive outcome on how much your assets have left over.
Yeah.
One of the exercises I like to do with clients is say, here's a projection of where your assets are going to be. We set them down with the software and say, okay, well, if you were just to take option 1, spend out of pocket for all of your retirement money for long-term care for 3 years, here's what you have left over. Okay, maybe that's $200,000. Here's what you have if you had a $2,000 a month benefit. Okay, well, now at the end of that, there's $500,000.
Right.
So, which one do you like better, really?
Yeah, because you're shielding that retirement amount and your assets from having to use them to, worst case, spend down to Medicaid and lose everything to pay for the nursing home.
exactly. And one thing that that I always show people are, where's the break-even point, right? Because I'm putting years and years of paying these premiums every month, and when do I actually get money out of the policy, right? So we look at that and we say, hey, you would have completely paid yourself back after 50 days of coverage, or whatever that number is, depending on, so I can do the math there and say, hey, here's the value behind what you're putting away.
And that 75% of policyholders filing claims for long-term care. I mean, that's that's a good probability that you're going to need that.
Yeah, exactly.
So that makes sense.
Again, that's why we go back and we look at the underwriting. It's tougher to get from things because so many people are going to use it. So really qualifying when you're young and healthy are keys to doing this.
Yeah, that's a great point. So we've talked about long-term care, and I know there's people out there that still probably think, I don't want to pay a monthly or annual premium to be in a nursing home, or I don't think I'm going to need long-term care. Are there any other ways that you can protect yourself against that? Maybe as part of other products or other creative ways to safeguard your assets and protect against that?
Yeah, so that's one of the biggest objections that we get with any insurance, but especially one where you're paying a sizable amount of money over the term years for long-term care is, what if I put in this money, which maybe it's $150,000 over my lifetime, and I never use the thing, right? Just went down the drain. So that can be a big drag on on people saying, hey, let's just roll the dice, because that doesn't sound worth it to me.
Yeah, right.
So we've got a couple ways that we can get around that, and I'll talk about how we can utilize life insurance policies with this now we're new into the space. So what this is life insurance policy with what we call a long-term care rider. And it's a great option for those people that say, how I like to approach this to clients is say, no matter what happens, somebody is going to get this money someday, right? So let's use an example. Say I decide I want to get a $300,000 life insurance policy, the long-term care rider on it. So what that does is, if I die, straight life insurance, my family, whoever, gets $300,000. If I am still alive and say I'm 87 years old and now I need to go into the nursing home, I can essentially take that $300,000 and it's now a pool of money to use for my long-term care instead.
Okay.
So that's a great option. Oh yeah, by the way, it's also a permanent life insurance policy, so you can fund it and build up cash value and do all those fun benefits, living benefits that any other permanent whole life insurance policy has for people.
Yeah. So, I mean, that sounds like a great option because you have the death benefit. Is there a reason why someone would choose long-term care insurance over the rider on the life insurance?
Right. Well, the life insurance is going to be a little bit more expensive because you're paying for life insurance, right? So, that money's going to be used, guaranteed, right? It's not just going to go away. So naturally, there's going to be a little bit more premium on it. So if it fits the budget and it's an option that you really like, absolutely go that way. Okay. Super smart. There's a couple things that a traditional policy has that the life insurance with long-term care rider doesn't have, and that's going to be that partnership protection that we talked about, protecting your assets. And what we don't have any kind of inflation benefits on these. Sure. So if I look at, those are two things, and sometimes we'll build out both, right? So maybe you want a long-term care plan for this piece, traditional long-term care, it's going to have those benefits that we want there. And now I want to supplement that with maybe another $100,000 life insurance policy that can also be used for long-term care if I need it. So that's just another little tool to have in your back pocket if you want that. Yeah.
Any other ways to protect your assets and plan for those years that you're potentially looking at long-term care?
Well, really, those are the three, right? So we can go over here. If I say, what's the most extreme on this end? It's self-insure, right? Most extreme on this end, it's buy your traditional long-term care plan that have been around forever. And then, kind of our middle of the road option is say, hey, let's do something like get a life insurance policy with a long-term care rider. There are some annuities now that have long-term care benefits, but the downside to that is, like any other annuity, you have to have a big pile of cash up front to dump in that. So most people don't find that as attractive, but it's an option that's out there. You should definitely explore depending on your situation.
Yeah, and we didn't talk much about self-pay, but any way you can anticipate that or structure those funds to prepare for that if it arises?
Yes. So yeah, we walk everybody through an exercise that says, hey, here's your options to self-insure, right?
Mm-hmm.
So essentially we let's just look at La Crosse County. I think if I look up our stats right now, for assisted living, we're at about $3,000 to $3,500 a month.
Wow.
What you need, right?
Yeah.
So we say, okay, well, let's take that. Now you're 50 years old right now. Okay, well, now let's run the inflation, do all the fancy math and say, what's that going to cost when you're 80 years old? Okay. Yeah. Now, how much of your assets that you have, you should set aside right now and earmark for that, meaning you're not going to touch them.
Mm-hmm.
That pile of money is for long-term care. And that's where it's going to go. So no vacations out of that money.
Yeah.
You're not going to get the world cruise, all of that stuff. That's for long-term care. So if you have the discipline to do that and make sure that money is perfectly earmarked, that's really the smartest way to go about doing that. Most people look at that and they say, well, now I have to set aside this amount of money to grow by 6 or 7%. So that someday when I'm age 85, that money will be there.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And
then you get to 65 and you're wondering if you're going to make it to 85.
Right.
Or you do and you hadn't anticipated living that long, and now some of your income has changed, and can you still have the discipline to not touch that pile? I would imagine that's difficult.
So yeah, and then we don't know what market conditions are going to be like, all sorts of other variables that you're still vulnerable to, right? Yeah. So that your assets are vulnerable to.
Absolutely.
Market risk, inflation risk. You haven't planned for it. So now you have to go back, and again, we talked about this a little bit earlier. Say we have a down market year. Oh, now you need long-term care. How likely are you going to be to want to do that at this point?
Right. That makes sense. All right. Well, thanks, Scott. Thanks for sharing about long-term care, preparing for retirement, Medicare, all of those things. It's been great to have you here. Yeah.
Thanks, Colin.
Check out our YouTube channel, like and subscribe if you haven't yet. We're going to continue interviews like this with people who, like I said, are experts in areas that are adjacent to Medicare, connected to Medicare, things that we think you need to know as you prepare for the Medicare years. All right, thanks. We'll see you next time.